good people don't smoke marijuana.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. Hey, boy, don't feel my world untrue. Yeah, I want to talk to you. My world can be true if you do what I tell you to. I want to talk to you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, November 4th, 2017. I'm your host, Larry Love. We're here every week to bring you the latest information on the use of medical cannabis and adult use of cannabis, and the info comes from all over the globe. And this week, our guest will be one of our favorite Florida updaters and advocates, Alexander Nachman, and we'll be talking to him after we do a little bit of news and talk about some other things. But first, as always, I've got news for you. 1, 2, 3.
I've got news for you.
Yeah, and the big news this week was kind of interesting from the FDA, actually. And FDA issues warning letters over CBD claims. Okay, now this is in regards to the claims that CBD companies are making on their packaging and in their advertising and on their website. 4 CBD companies were warned on Tuesday to stop asserting that their products can achieve unproven things such as cure or treat cancer. The Food and Drug Administration announced Tuesday that they have issued warning letters, including the popular Stanley Brothers, over the health claims the companies were making about their products. The Stanley Brothers Social Enterprises LLC found themselves alongside 3 other companies who were issued warnings on October 31st around claims made on more than 25 different products, and thanks to Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the Stanley Brothers are definitely the biggest names of the bunch. Substances that contain components of marijuana will be treated like any other products that make unproven claims to shrink cancer tumors, said FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, MD, said in a statement on the letters being distributed. We don't let companies market products that deliberately prey on sick people with baseless claims that their substances can shrink or cure cancer. And we're not going to look the other way on enforcing these principles when it comes to marijuana-containing products. Now, so the letters went out, and I'm just going to stop this for a second here. Hang on. Because I want to play for you Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, who in Israel for the last 50 or 60 years has been taking money from the United States government to do research on cannabis, and he invented THC. Listen to this. Here they are saying that it doesn't shrink tumors and it's not a treatment for cancer. Here's Dr. Raphael Mechoulam.
Israel is among the leaders in medical marijuana research. From his lab bench in Jerusalem, Raphael Mechoulam has fathered nearly 2 generations of peer-reviewed medical research. He first discovered THC in 1964.
Cannabis, although it had been investigated, Nobody had really isolated it in pure form, and neither were all the other compounds there. So I thought that it's high time that somebody should do that.
For 40 years at Hebrew University, researchers study effects of THC and other cannabinoids on people and laboratory animals. Meshulam dissolves the THC in an oil-based solution. In this form, measured doses can be administered accurately. Researchers here have witnessed promising results in the treatments of brain trauma, diabetes, cancers, and osteoporosis. 20-year-old Eyal Preisler underwent a bone marrow transplant a year and a half ago. Since then, his body experiences a chronic quasi-rejection called graft versus host disease.
I am treated by the THC drops for 2 months already, meaning that I just started and I already saw changes. Whether it is the digestive system, the diarrhea that is gone, and my skin that was very hard is now softer and back to its original state. My appetite is back. It significantly increases the appetite, and I actually gained 4 kilos in the past 2 months. I need to gain a lot more weight to get back to where I was.
Each dose that Eyal takes is as measured as any prescribed medicine. Most marijuana taken as medicine in America is not.
Medical marijuana in the States means use of marijuana against diseases. Now, from my point of view, medical marijuana is not well defined. It should be better defined. If you take aspirin, you want to take 500 milligrams of aspirin. You don't want to say, well, I don't know how much I'm getting, 20 milligrams or 2 grams. I don't see any difference why one should have a different attitude when working with marijuana. And if marijuana can have anything between 2% and 20% THC, I don't think that this is the right way to do it.
One thing is certain. Much cannabis today has no resemblance to the plant of our ancestors. This weed, the proverbial sow's ear of yesterday's cannabis, has become a silk purse.
Life seems to be very complicated in every place of the world. Most of us are anxious from time to time. Most of us are depressed from time to time. We want to change that. And in many cases, such a change can be brought forward by cannabis. So that's why people use it. That's all.
So if a stranger walked up to you and poured pebble-like seeds into your hand and then said, plant them and your harvest can be made into rope, cloth, or paper, it could help the sick or intoxicate. What would you say? Would you keep the seeds or chuck them away?
Well, it's all about the seeds, and that clip might have been a little bit mislabeled, but because they talked about the THC a little bit. But Meshulam has been taking money in Israel in general from the United States to the tunes of millions of dollars over the last 50 years, and there is plenty of peer-reviewed stuff out there that research and so forth. But let's get back to the CBD thing, because this FDA letter and so forth is going to I think it's not going to do much, but just make them not put the claims out there, even though the government's being a little bit hypocritical. So we're going to continue on talking about CBD. And in Indiana, here is an Eyewitness News report about CBD, and the word's getting spread around. And here's this one.
CBD oil, a drug in such demand that it is flying off store shelves locally and around the nation. It's a story we've been following for a while now, and tonight we are digging into what CBD is and why some are calling it a miracle drug. And if it is helping so many people, why is its legality still in question in the state of Indiana? Eyewitness News' Leanne Stuck seeks out the answers to those questions tonight in our special report, What About CBD?
Oil extracted from the hemp plant, also known as CBD oil, has captured the attention of people everywhere.
Got actual proven cases beyond dispute that this works.
The product, commonly confused for marijuana, is oil extracted from the hemp plant that has no psychoactive effect and very little to no THC, the chemical that causes the high in marijuana. So how does this controversial product help children with epilepsy? Eyewitness News reached out to physicians and doctors throughout the tri-state and could not find one to speak on the subject. That is, until we found Dr. Tom Vidic, a South Bend, Indiana neurologist who the Indiana Medical Association says is an expert on the subject.
For a type of epilepsy, this is neonatal childhood epilepsy, there's been some signals that CBD, refined CBD oil, may have a role in seizure control. And so there's the potential for, is this one more drug in our armamentarium to use to treat patients? Why does it work? That I don't understand.
Indiana State Senator Jim Toms of Wadesville heard the cries from families with children who have treatment-resistant epilepsy, who wanted to try CBD oil, but legally couldn't.
I did some research, and it looked to me like it was a very worthwhile effort to try to accomplish. And so I introduced the bill 3 years ago, and I didn't realize I was going to meet such resistance, but there was. And I couldn't get a hearing on the bill.
Every year, he continued to advocate for the legislation, bringing families like the Mershons to Indianapolis to testify. 6-year-old Jamison Mershon suffers from epilepsy. His mother, Mariah, began giving him CBD oil for treatment back in 2014.
We immediately saw great results. We saw improvements in his coordination, in his balance, in his attention span. He stopped having seizures altogether.
But because CBD oil is still listed federally in the same category as marijuana, it was not legal. So Mariah stopped giving the oil to Jamison out of fear the state's Child Protective Services would be called.
Almost immediately, he returned to his prior state, having seizures a lot more often.
This testimony playing a key role in the passage of Indiana State House Bill 1148. That bill passed in July of 2017 and made it legal for children who have treatment-resistant epilepsy to use CBD oil.
He received his CBD card in the mail. We ordered the CBD product that we use called Charlotte's Web. And he's been taking it for 10 weeks now. In the 10 weeks, he has not had a seizure.
But not everyone was in support. State Senator Aaron Freeman told Eyewitness News that he believes it's a federal problem and more research needs to be done.
I think it's important that we get more information and we vet this accurately to find out exactly what the capabilities are and the risk benefits.
But is it legal for anyone in Indiana to use? There have been conflicting interpretations of state law, but stores that sell it and state excise police say the substance is legal as long as the product has 0.03% or less THC. Also, state excise police told Eyewitness News it will not be confiscating CBD oil from stores, which has led to booming business for stores like Adele's Naturally in Evansville, which can't keep CBD oil on the shelf.
I'm sorry to tell you that we have sold out in the last 30 minutes.
And seeing so many people come in and try it, seeing so many people come back with lives changed, with just these amazing results that we hear from people every day. I mean, it's a dream come true for me.
What I've learned, I had no idea there were this many people in the community that were in pain.
I've just been dealing with it for about a year and a half now with nothing, so.
Senator Toms hopes to expand his legislation to continue to help others.
I am not going to back away from it. And if there's something we can approach this coming session to try to bring in other illnesses, other cases where people are dealing with that wasn't in the initial category, we want to include them.
Once again, that is Indiana. That was a report from their Eyewitness News team. Newsweek also did a report. This is a big week for CBD and also the opioid epidemic. We'll get to that in a second. But here is Newsweek, major media talking about CBD.
In this study, we treated children with Dravet syndrome, which is a very serious genetic form of epilepsy that unfortunately has a very high seizure burden and a very high mortality from epilepsy, that these children who had not responded to often 5 or 10 other treatments were given cannabidiol or a placebo in addition to their existing medications. Cannabidiol is the major non-psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, also known as marijuana. So cannabidiol does not produce any high or psychoactive properties and therefore has less potential side effects, especially for use in children, than a psychoactive compound such as THC.
We were in the double-blind placebo-controlled phase of the study, and we did that for 14 weeks, and we were totally convinced that she was in placebo because her seizures didn't change at all. And then we were able to roll into the open label extension, and the second day that we were in open label and we knew that she was getting the actual drug, she went seizure-free, completely seizure-free for 2 months, which has never happened.
The main findings of the study were that there was a very statistically significant reduction in the convulsive seizure frequency in patients who were randomized to cannabidiol when compared to patients who were randomized to placebo. So the message is that cannabidiol does work in reducing convulsive seizures in children with Dravet syndrome. My hope for the future is that this study will lead to more similar studies to assess cannabidiol and perhaps products containing both cannabidiol and THC in various forms of epilepsy.
And of course, working together, the entourage effect is what helps most situations. So again, this week also was very big in regard to the opioid epidemic. And our people in charge have put Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, in charge of our epidemic. And he's just a nutcase. Chris Christie compares medical marijuana to the opioid crisis. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie thinks that today's expansion of medical marijuana laws will cause problems similar to the rise in opioid prescribing over the past 2 decades. Quote, there's a lack of sophisticated outcome data on dose, potency, and abuse potential for marijuana, Christie wrote in a letter to President Trump on Wednesday. Quote, this mirrors the lack of data in the 1990s and early 2000s when opioid prescribing multiplied across healthcare settings and led to the current epidemic of abuse, misuse, and addiction. Christie is just a nut. He also went on to say, Chris Christie just said that marijuana will lead to more deaths. When you think of Chris Christie, you don't tend to think about rational, well-thought-out political arguments, and the latest statements about marijuana will simply reinforce that image. Christie was in Indianapolis this week to discuss America's opioid addiction as part of the commission created by President Trump. During the speech, Christie began talking about marijuana legalization and how it would make the opioid crisis worse. In fact, he said it would lead to more deaths. So, I mean, this guy is just from another planet. Okay, let's see. I got some more stuff to play for you and some more stories. Here in New Mexico, we've been trying to deal with the opioid epidemic as well. Last year, or earlier this year actually, our board of medical doctors that approve and research the use of cannabis sent to our Secretary of Health, who's an attorney, not a doctor, that opioid abuse should be on, and as a qualified condition. Of course, it was turned down. The Secretary of Health, again, is an attorney, not a doctor, did not listen to the panel of doctors, so they're trying it one more time. This was yesterday, Friday. Here is the news conference that went on before the actual meeting at the DOH.
The opioid epidemic in our country is now a public health emergency, with New Mexico consistently ranking well above the national average. Today, the State Department of Health's Medical Cannabis Advisory Board voted unanimously to recommend approval of a petition that would expand medical marijuana access to those battling an opioid addiction. Morgan Aguilar was at that meeting and tells us what happened next.
If there was some way that my sister could have used cannabis instead of opioids, she'd probably be standing right next to me today.
To many New Mexicans, this political battle is an urgent matter of life and death.
Because I could access medical marijuana legally, I am able to be here today, alive.
Nearly 50,000 people have medical marijuana cards in New Mexico, but those with opioid use disorder can't get one.
It seems very strange that something as important as opioid dependence treatment should not be included in the list of eligible conditions.
Manager with the Drug Policy Alliance.
Friday morning, a united group of clinicians, people recovering from an opioid addiction, and some who have lost loved ones to an overdose, tried to convince the Department of Health Medical Cannabis Advisory Board to add OUD to the list of conditions allowed to access medical cannabis. A similar petition was already approved by the same board last year, but Department of Health Secretary Lynn Gallagher shut it down.
How many people have died last year because the petition wasn't signed?
The Secretary has yet to receive the notes on Friday's meeting, but in a statement, a department spokesman said in part, all of the medicinal uses for cannabis currently accepted for treatment by the medical cannabis program have all been supported by high-quality evidence. This is not the case with an opiate addiction. The group of advocates hopes they now have enough evidence to persuade Secretary Gallagher. There is no set timeline that the Secretary is required to follow to respond. Last time, it took her more than 6 months. In Santa Fe, Morgan Aguilar, KOB Eyewitness News 4.
You know, as long as we have an attorney telling us what we can do with our bodies and not listening to the advisory board of medical doctors that have studied this stuff, as long as we have the attorney as the head of the health department, nothing is going to get changed without a lawsuit. We need a class action lawsuit here in New Mexico to get this opioid dependency on as a qualified condition, and that's what I am hoping that we can do. Here in New Mexico, medical cannabis actually started back in the 70s, and we've been doing research. You know, a big project that had $500,000 back in the 70s, but we're still doing research at the University of New Mexico, and here is a report about that research.
Amelia had her first seizure at 4 days old. She was limp, she was unresponsive, she was having trouble breathing. Her seizures last anywhere from 2 minutes to over an hour. At its worst, in a 12-hour period, we counted about 17 that we could physically see. On an EEG, it shows more than triple that amount. It's very heartbreaking because you don't know. I mean, every seizure that she had could kill her. She died twice. So knowing that each potential one that she has could take her is very scary.
Patients like Amelia are a great example of the most precious individuals in our society that unfortunately don't have access to the most optimal treatments available. My name is Jacob Miguel Vigil. I'm a tenured associate professor in the psychology department at the University of New Mexico. In August of 2016, I started the Medical Cannabis Research Fund in order to provide a mechanism for the general public to support objective, cutting-edge research on the medical benefits and safety concerns associated with using medical cannabis as a pharmaceutical agent.
The first time we gave Amelia CBD, she was a little over 2 months. Within days, we saw a big difference in her, not only us, but the medical professionals that were with her every day saw a difference. It's like a whole 360. It's completely different. I have a baby that's living a normal life from taking cannabis versus a child that was on pharmaceuticals that did nothing.
It's very hard for researchers like myself to obtain federal funding for research that can potentially illuminate medical benefits of cannabis. I started medical cannabis research to provide a voice not only for patients that are dealing with complex medical issues, but to provide the general public with a mechanism to support the type of research that they feel is most important for themselves, their family, and their communities.
I think we need to start researching medical cannabis. I've seen the benefits of what it can do. I mean, it saved my daughter's life. It could potentially save other people's lives, other children's lives. I think that if I didn't give her CBD, I don't think I'd still have her today.
Through your help and donations to the Medical Cannabis Research Fund, we're going to be able to conduct cutting-edge research that's going to be able to help thousands, if not millions of patients, just like baby Amelia.
And again, that's going on here in New Mexico. Okay, a couple more stories. This next one I thought was really quite heartwarming, and I wanted to play it for you. These are a few veterans sitting around smoking and talking about cannabis and PTSD.
How people think about the high that you get from cannabis is really been distorted over the years.
My name is John Tessioni, and I served for 18 years.
My name is Seamus O'Reilly, and I served for 18 years.
And my name is Bruce Frampton. I served for 25 years.
When you're dealing with operational stress injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder, it's so all-encompassing that, I mean, you could only have one of the maybe 8 to 10 or 12 symptoms, but that one symptom is controlling you.
Why do you think you lost a lot of friends right after diagnosis?
Stigma. It's a mental health thing. It's a lack of education, exactly.
And it's also a death knell. There was a time that you came forward with a mental health, issue of any kind. They would kick you out of the military because it's a lot easier to deal with that than to have to deal with the person and their health issues.
Cigarettes vaporizer, if you guys try to use that.
Thank you.
In 1994, on December 31st, so this is New Year's Eve, myself and another guy, we were in a Jeep, and there was about 30 guys to the side of the road, 25, 30 guys. We thought they were just going to fire in the air. We drove. They went in the middle of the road, tried to stop us. We saw a break in the crowd. We went through it, and they opened fire point blank at us. My buddy made it through. I got hit 7 times. He got hit 3. The vehicle took over 100 rounds, just 54 in the back. And on 2 wheels, he drove to the main camp and saved both of our lives.
First time I went down was under the UN flag. And around 11 o'clock, 11:30 that night, I don't know if they were drinking, the Haitians, or what, but then they just started driving by all night, just doing drive-by shootings at us. And they were just busting rounds continuously, like in the air sometimes the rounds were coming our direction. So light her up.
Yeah, whenever you guys are ready.
All right.
John, anything?
No, I have mine. Thank you very much.
How people think about the high that you get from cannabis is really been distorted over the years, especially by the people, and the worst ones, in my opinion, are the people who've never smoked cannabis.
I mean, I could speak, and I'll tell you, like, I lost many friends. It is black and white for some. If the moment that you speak about cannabis, marijuana, weed, anything whatsoever, you're bad.
But I don't think it's a good idea.
He's afraid of the vaporizer, I think.
A life without cannabis, without weed, without marijuana, I would be an alcoholic. I mean, and I would be dead eventually because there would be no stopping to me.
I've lived a time of not sleeping, and to go back to that is ridiculous. Having discovered cannabis can do such an amazing job at that. It's like such a game changer. So.
And then when I started to use cannabis as you would any other medication, not use it like, oh, I feel stressed, I'm gonna go smoke a joint. It's part of my day. I'm continuously medicated. I have not had any sort of feeling. I feel like I'm here to help people as opposed to go just make away with myself. 10 years later, here I am. You know, it's been a shitty ride, you know, but every day is better than the last. And a lot to do with, you know, the medication that I found, the friends that I found, and the company that I keep. And my perspective is somewhat changed. I don't look at the world the way I used to.
Again, that's cannabis helping veterans. A couple of veterans, 4 of them sitting around and talking about how it helps them. Okay, on the lighter side of things, a couple more stories before we take a break. This is from the internet. Hug hormone oxytocin boosts bonding by releasing cannabis-like molecules. Whichever persona you prefer, the love molecule, cuddle chemical, or hug hormone, oxytocin plays a big role in bonding. Spraying monkeys with the stuff, for example, has been found to positively affect their social behavior, making them more communicative and promoting interaction with others. Among many other things, weed also exerts similar effects on human behavior, but how exactly it does that is a little bit hazy. A new study is offering us clues and a link between these two very different substances. It turns out that oxytocin might make social interactions more rewarding and pleasurable by stimulating our own cannabinoid system. According to the research, it does this by triggering the release of another wonderfully nicknamed chemical called the bliss molecule, anandamide, coined as such due to the fact that the brain receptors it activates leads to an increased motivation and happiness. This is the first time that this marijuana-like neurotransmitter has been shown to contribute to the reward of being social, and also offers us further insight into how oxytocin acts on the brain. Importantly, these findings could help us understand the mechanisms underlying certain social impairments, for example, those with autism, suggesting a possible avenue to explore for the treatment. There's a bit more to this, and it's a very interesting study and an article, and it's let's see, what is it? It's on IFLscience.com. Again, IFLscience.com, and it's called The Hug Hormone Oxytocin Boosts Bonding by Releasing Cannabis-Like Molecules. Now, in the same vein of things, this just came out last week. Marijuana smokers have more sex, researchers discover. Men and women who frequently smoke marijuana appear to have more sex, according to new research from the Stanford University School of Medicine. God, I love Stanford. The study counters common perceptions that regular cannabis use can put a damper on bedroom activity by impairing sexual desire or performance, and offers good news for the 20 million plus adult Americans who reportedly use the drug. Frequent marijuana use doesn't seem to impair sexual motivation or performance. If anything, it's associated with increased coital frequency, said the study's senior author, my hero, urologist Michael Eisenberg. In fact, pot users are having about 20% more sex than pot abstainers, according to Eisenberg's research. The findings, based on analysis of more than 50,000 Americans aged 25 to 45, are published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine. The study is the first to examine the relationship between marijuana use and the frequency of sexual intercourse at the population level in the United States. Marijuana use is very common, but its large-scale use and association with sexual frequency hasn't been studied much in a scientific way, Eisenberg noted. Interestingly, the research found the positive association between smoking weed and having more sex applied across the board. The overall trend we saw applied to people of both sexes in all races, ages, educational levels, income groups, and religions, every health status, whether they were married or single, and whether or not they had kids. So, anyway, that is on RT.com. Again, RT.com. So we'll be right back, and we'll talk to Alexander Nachman, updating us on Florida and just the state of what's happening in cannabis all over. So we'll be right back after this.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana radio show.
And we're back. And once again, one of my favorite guests is Alexander Nachman from Florida. And Alex, we welcome you back to Medical Marijuana Radio.
Thank you so much.
So first, before we get into some of the politics and the opioid epidemic, give me a little update on what's happening in Florida. They have a medical cannabis program there that doesn't allow smoking, and people are taking it into their own hands to try to get it changed. So what's going on recently?
Well, that has continued to be a point of a disappointment for Florida residents who voted for Amendment 2 in, by a whopping number, 71%. We do have a lawsuit led by John Morgan for the smoking of medical cannabis. Basically, inhalation is a medically effective technique to deliver the cannabinoids into the bloodstream, and this is a part of what we all voted for, and it's a disappointment that they're not trying to allow it. There is one local dispensary, Knox, that also is against and called smokable cannabis an oxymoron, and we know that not to be the case. That's never been linked to cancer in this way. It's a bronchial dilator and a perfectly effective way, and we've seen this for everything from Parkinson's tremors, to other illnesses.
Like epilepsy. So like epilepsy, Parkinson, MS, any of these debilitating diseases that need like instant onset. Smoking, obviously, or vaping is definitely a instant way to get effect. And I saw a video online where a young child was having a seizure, and they had a roll-on. They put it on his foot, and within seconds the seizure stopped. I mean, that's not smoke, but that's just showing that certain conditions need instant relief. And smoking, as you just said, is a bronchial dilator. There's studies out there that say it actually improves lung function and lung volume. So
that's correct.
It's really the high that the naysayers don't want us to have. And as I've said many times on this show, they sit around at their 3 martini lunches discussing why we shouldn't get high while we're trying to cure ourselves.
Yeah, and it's the pain benefit that comes with that almost instantaneously. The tremors go to an end. They do give it to asthma patients as well, so we know it does improve lung function. And maybe we should ask Michael Phelps if he had any benefits.
Yeah, that's true. Well, he's only won about 16, I think, gold medals while he was using cannabis. So, I mean, I believe that they are lightening up the Olympic Committee and allowing cannabinoids to be in the systems. Do you know anything about that? I think I read that somewhere.
That is true, and a long time ago, Ross, and I'm spacing on his last name, but he had got his medal stripped from him temporarily and got it returned. The Olympic Committee is basically taking more of a global view towards cannabis at this time, and it's allowable within certain limits.
Right. So that's really great that things are getting changed in that way. And of course, football injuries and head injuries in football and so forth, and using cannabis is a very big subject right now. And I know that you and I off the air just discussed a lawsuit. Tell us a little bit about that lawsuit, what you know about that with Marvin Washington, ex-football player, and the others.
Oh yeah, I mean that's great news. Basically, they are bringing Jeff Sessions in and having the DEA stand trial in a federal lawsuit to deschedule cannabis and asking them to informal depositions to defend the position about how cannabis isn't medicine, when we all know that the government owns the patent rights to cannabis medicine for the purposes of antioxidants and neuroprotectants, and that not only is it applicable to those diseases that for instance, epilepsy being linked to the neuroprotectant side of the patent, in which they have a little girl included in the lawsuit that uses the medicine for epilepsy. So it's just one application, and the more research we do on the plant, I think the more that they'll find that it works on. And this is where the problem is of not having it rescheduled entirely.
Right. Well, there's a bunch of hypocrisy going on here. The patent that you speak of, 6630507, does specifically say that that cannabinoids shrink tumors and is good for Alzheimer's and MS and Parkinson's and epilepsy, and goes on and on and on. So at the same time as they're saying that there's no medicinal value and it's a Schedule I drug, this patent has been around for over 10 years or so, so I think I'm excited that maybe someone is taking a lawsuit to push that point, because they can't. Which is it? I mean, is there medicinal value? Well, yes, we know that. The other thing that most people don't know is that our government, denying that there's medicinal value, has been sending millions of dollars to Israel with Dr. Raphael Mechoulam supporting the research that's been done in Israel for all these years. So this has to come out into the open, and it has to get changed. It's just there's too much hypocrisy going on with our government, and of course, where we are right now with the current chump as president, you can get into that a little bit. That the opioid epidemic is horrifying. There's hundreds of people dying a day, and they put Chris Christie in charge of it, and he is the governor of a state that has numerous billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies in that state.
Oh yeah, a huge conflict of interest for Christie, and I'm from New Jersey, and of course there's headquarters of all sorts of pharmaceutical companies there in central New Jersey.
Johnson & Johnson, one of the biggest for years, have been up in Lawrenceville area for a long, long time.
That's right. They are the biggest, in fact. And, we know that it's medicine. We know that they're suppressing it because we know that it works on so many of the things that it's applicable towards. If we look at the mortality rates, leading causes of death in America for cancer is the second largest killer of our people. And, chronic lower respiratory diseases. I mean, where do you think those are caused? They're caused from cigarettes. And, cannabis is non-toxic in this way and has been shown to reduce cancer markers and tumor size. Meanwhile, you go further down the list and you have accidents account for, it's the fourth leading cause of death in this country. Well, 1/3 of all traffic fatalities in this country is alcohol related. I mean, each and every step of the way, you can understand from the fact that it's medicine, but at every step of the way, you see not only a conflict of interest, somebody keeping it off the market for their own selfish gains, but you see where society could potentially benefit from making a better choice, whether that choice is a euphoric choice or that choice is a medicinal choice. But by the way, number 5 and 6 on the list are stroke and Alzheimer's, and those are two of the things that are included in the government's patent for cannabis medicine.
Neuroprotective.
That's right. Well, the Alzheimer's is on the neuroprotectant side, and the stroke is from the antioxidant side. And they also include, on the antioxidant side, they include, brain trauma, which it's like, hey, hello, NFL. Get with the program. But you and I both know. You and I both know that it goes much deeper than all of this, down to the racial ties and the incarceration rates. And with regards to Trump and all of it, if we're going to make business sense in this country, I've estimated that we can save $48.5 billion, make $48.5 billion by legalizing nationwide, including close to $500 million savings to the Medicare and the Medicaid system based on lower costs of prescription drug use.
Right, and also, it's a known, statistical fact that states with legalized cannabis, medical or adult use, have a 25% lower opioid abuse in their state. So, I mean, this is not, you can't deny this. Now, the problem, though, is that our government currently, Trump and Christie in charge of our terrible crisis, they want to try to find another substance to use to get people off of opioids, but no one is mentioning cannabis. I don't know why some of the people that know that it's helping just aren't putting that out. They're not saying anything about that. I mean, even the other day on CNN, Gupta was mentioning kratom as a possible getting people off of opioids. So there are other things out there, but kratom is being talked about, but I don't know why cannabis isn't.
Well, kratom's being talked about, and it's another substance that they've kind of quasi-bastardized. But it's certainly not as strong as fentanyl or some of these other poisons that are causing accidental overdoses all the time. And prescription pills in this country kill more people, almost twice as many people, Larry, as all illegal drugs combined per week.
Yeah, the situation is horrible, and it's good that it's coming to a head publicly. But what they're going to do about it, I'm sure what's going to happen is the pharmaceutical companies are going to come out with another pill to get them off of opioids. I mean, look, they do have stuff like Suboxone, which I believe it blocks the receptors, so that if you take Suboxone and then you try to get high on heroin, I don't believe you can. I think that's the way that works. If you know, let me know.
I'm not familiar with that one. I know one of the biggest ones, which is 100 times, 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, is this fentanyl. And you've seen these opiate overdoses increase by 4 times over the last 15 years. And it's just too much. If you think Prince wanted to die, I've got news for you. He had a great life. He didn't want to die.
Yeah.
And
do we know exactly? I mean, was it just a toxicity of prescription pills that he died of, or I'm not real sure. What happened.
Yeah, it was a toxicity issue, and you know what? It comes down to sometimes it comes down to a matter of body chemistry. And literally, I believe if you didn't drink enough water that day and then had too much of the high-level toxins in your body, I think your body says, hey, I'll shut down for a little bit until we can get better with the mix. I mean, just like you would purge potassium and magnesium if your salt intake, was too high, this type of situation.
So
okay?
How do we educate the people in charge of the opioid epidemic? How do we get them to understand that cannabis really could be a fix for that? And I hate to use the word fix, it's sort of a double entendre, but I mean, there's people that are suffering out there, and the reason they're suffering is because their physicians have been over prescribing this stuff for 30 years. It starts there.
Right. And, of course, there was just this big conflict of interest last week with this. You mentioned the gentleman's name, Kapoor, which he was paying off the doctors to write scripts for the products.
Right. He has an opioid. He manufactures and sells opiates. So that's and they actually arrested him. I've seen nothing since then. But, my first thought was he'll most likely be put in charge of the opioid epidemic by Monday, I'm sure.
hilarious. And it does seem that, Trump has turned a blind eye. Again, it is hypocrisy at the highest level. And, it's a conflict of interest between these special interest groups that lobby to keep it off the market for their own gain. And it's at the expense of everyone else.
Yeah.
It's because they've got the money and they're padding the campaign dollars. And, listen, I'm not against Trump. I'm not for him. I'm for fixing things. And I'm for the truth to come out. And at this point, if we're going to fix things, I think we could do so. And opiates are a part of the problem for the ills of the country. People are dying. And again, you go down the list: cancer, Alzheimer's, incidents from alcohol and other things that are killing our people. I just feel like cannabis can be a better choice. Economically, I know that it is, versus suppressing it, except for companies like Budweiser, companies like these pharmaceutical companies will lose out. I actually don't care if they lose out, and I've got news for you. They care even less if you die.
Absolutely. And, I think I read an article the other day that the beer company Corona is now investing in the cannabis industry. Beer companies are going to take a huge hit, and they already are, from what I understand. And so it wouldn't surprise me if more are going to get into the cannabis industry to sort of offset the losses that they will indeed suffer from the legalization for adult use. There's no doubt about it. So watch for that to happen. We've all been worried about the cigarette companies and so forth, and so beer and cigarettes. I mean, they're going to be losing out, and they're going to be trying to get into our industry, which is really sad. I'm sort of against people who have been against us, and then they come in and try to take money from our industry when they've been putting us in jail for all these years. So there's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of greed going on, in our industry. Let's get back to Florida for a couple of seconds. Have you been in a Florida dispensary? And if not, do you know what they offer as far as products are concerned?
Yes, the fact is I actually have not been in a Florida dispensary, and sadly, of course, like most states with poor medical laws, it is cheaper to seek out the black market in terms of product, and the availability of product is limited. I am aware that they do have various oil products, and that you can get FICO, but also predominantly it's high THC product, and there's a prohibition on flower, which is just absolutely preposterous. And I think it is in an attempt to manipulate the system, because they don't want you to be able to be possessing raw flower, and that's one step away from maybe having your own plant.
Right. It's a shame that that they're not allowed to grow. I mean, certainly, like here in New Mexico, I have a license to grow my own medicine. There's other states that allow you to do that. A part of freeing this plant from the hypocrisy is to allow people to grow. And I think that's so important when states are legalizing for medical and for recreational, that we be allowed to grow. This is a non-toxic plant. We have been growing, for years. There's people that have been growing their whole lives, and we have to make sure that when we legalize, we do two things. We make sure that patients or recreational users are allowed to grow X amount of plants, and the other thing is we need to just protect the medical industry, because they really are two separate entities. They really need to be separate.
Yeah, and I agree.
So, as my opinion also is, if Florida has FICO, are they selling it like in syringes and also capsules? Because that really is the best medicine. I mean, if you're really serious about curing your condition, taking the oil in those strengths, finding your dosage and so forth, really is what's going to help. I mean, smoking for the onset, yes, absolutely. We have to have edibles, we have to have smokables, and the oil, of course, is very important. So, are they making all kinds of edibles for the Florida dispensaries right now? Can you go get brownies and cupcakes and gummy bears, and what do they have there? Do you know?
Now, I actually haven't been inside one because without a card, they won't let you in.
Right, but what are you hearing?
But I don't know for certain whether or not there's been edibles available. I am seeing oil, I am seeing capsules, and I am seeing vapable products. Of course, I certainly am aware, as I get told by individuals, that basically black market products exist, in the form of edibles. And again, it's a shame that the black market may be less expensive than the legal market. And this is where access is so important. And you've got guys like Gary Stein fighting at the front line in Tallahassee about having access. So, he held up a document in the 2 minutes he was allowed to speak to the legislator the other week. And I believe this was actually in Orange County, although he's up in Tallahassee all the time. But they were looking to ban medical dispensaries in that town, in which 75% of their town voted for medical marijuana. And, he's saying, look, the state's come out with 7 pages worth of violations for having the stuff versus, hey, didn't we just approve it all?
Well, it's hypocrisy again, and it's not. It's these municipalities that aren't really taking care of their constituents. Okay, now this is a medicine. Okay, why should someone have to go drive to another county to get their medicine, or another city? It doesn't make sense medicinally. Recreationally, look, even California has some opt-out stuff in their laws recreationally, but I don't think there should be any opt-out medicinally. And I also am for nationally legalizing medical cannabis, and of course legalization too. But the medical. The reason we have legalization in like 8 states and Washington D.C. is because the medical industry has proven that this product is not hurting people, and that's why I think we're getting finally to an adult use thing. But the opt-out thing, I just think is hurting sick people, and I wish they would do away with that, at least in the medical industry.
I mean, I totally agree. I think that they're hurting patients, they're hurting people. And the reason they're doing so is for their own selfish gains. And when you have, 71% of the state, or even in areas close to 80% of the populace votes for it, and then they say, oh no, we're not going to have a dispensary here. Oh, those things should be in the bad part of town.
Right. Well, what they're doing is the economy of these cities will suffer unnecessarily, because there won't be more jobs for people to work in the dispensaries. The people will be taking their money out of that city or county and going next door, and it's just really a stupid situation. These people have their head in the sands when they do this, and they're just going to learn the hard way, because when they see the taxes that are coming in for certain cities and areas and how it's helping the community, they're going to want that money. So eventually, hopefully, things will change. Any final words or subjects that you would like to talk about before we go?
Well, I'd like to state that I think that the war on drugs is failing miserably. We spend, $76 billion there. If we could trim the cost on that by one, the law enforcement cost alone is $36 billion. If we can trim that by 1/3, based on the fact that almost half of all, drug arrests in this country are marijuana related. If we could trim the law enforcement costs by 1/3, that would be $13 billion. A tax on an illicit market of $50 billion at 20% flat would be $10 billion. And then, furthermore, the cost of incarceration, I'm certain, is above $50,000, although in my article to President Trump, I estimated it at $50,000.
I thought I heard 75,000 somewhere out in
Oh yeah,
public
and
somewhere.
trust me, I made my math low as not to be criticized. I'm certain it's much higher, but at 50,000 for 500,000 nonviolent offenders, you're talking about $25 billion there in costs that as a country we do not need to incur. And, you know, this is for supervision, you know, food, clothing, you know, supervision, medical care, you know, for these people that, you know, already had these things. The guy's on his way home from work to see his wife, okay, or, you know, go home to his girlfriend. He's got clothes on his back and he's weighing 225 pounds. I assume he ate that day.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You know, the fact is we can't afford medical care for our people because we're spending our dollars elsewhere. We're funding things that aren't important.
I'll tell you, the money that's wasted in our lives, you know, every day is just pretty amazing. Where can people read your essays and so forth?
Yeah, you know, you can find my stuff at alexandernachman.wordpress.com. I do not come out with, you know, something every day on that blog. And when I put something out, I put out a press release. Most recently, I put out a Just Say No to Budweiser, based on the fact that I'm a former quantitative model analyst on Wall Street. And I think the fundamentals on Budweiser aren't good. And they're not best in class, and they're not you know, an enterprise on the come. So I think you can make money by selling them. But for me, it's a metaphor about big alcohol. And I've written Trump and Obama, and I plan on continuing to create a legacy of writing in this way. And, you know, I appreciate you following me and the opportunity to continue to spread the good word about this plant and to hopefully make a dent in a very crooked structure that this country is participating, the paradigm that this country proliferates regarding cannabis and its usefulness.
Take a deep breath. Thank you. That was a very good rant there, Alexander. Alexander Nachman, and you said it's Alexander Nachman at WordPress.com?
Yeah, it's alexandernachman.wordpress.com.
.wordpress.com. And Nachman is Nachman. People check it out. He's very passionate and thoughtful about what he's writing and what he's thinking. Alexander, thank you so much for coming on the show again, and we'll get you back. Keep us posted on what's going on in Florida, please.
Will do, and I'll look into some of those items that you mentioned, so I'm a little bit prepared to speak about it, and really do appreciate it, Larry. I always enjoyed being a guest.
My pleasure. We'll be right back after this.
medical marijuana radio, radio show. The medical
Thank you, Alexander Nachman. Check out his blog, and we'll have him back again to keep us updated on Florida. Also, want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you are an advocate, if you are a patient, want to tell your story, if you have a website, you have a product, write us at info@mmjradio.com. Again, info@mmjradio.com. We're always looking for interesting stories and to promote some really great products that help people in our industry. If you'd like to hear some of our old shows, it's medicalmarijuanaradio.com. Also, mmjradio.com gets you there. My YouTube channel is LSLove88. SoundCloud, we're on, and Spreaker, we're MMJ Radio. We're on CannabisTube.net. Also on Spreaker and iHeartRadio. You can hear us on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. And we're also on Now TV, channel 937. More to come soon.
The medical marijuana.
Shalabah. Shalom.
Oh yeah, and fuck Trump.